Yesterday we were talking about ignorance, and I was thinking about, also we had some discussions yesterday that made us think back to when we were young, and what was the first ideas we had of Buddhism and the Buddha. And I was thinking about how the extent of our ignorance was quite unknown to me when I was young. That's what this talk is about a little bit, the extent of our ignorance. And the reason I find this helpful is because I find that oftentimes I have unrealistic expectations, and as I understand more really the Buddhist worldview, I find it helpful. It makes me more realistic, and I don't get so frustrated, I don't have so much doubt, or I find this helpful, so maybe you will too. So we're still working with these few pages from Geshe Rapton, and these were the pages that preceded what I talked about yesterday, and it's about the roots of samsara. And so I'd like you to think about this. I'll read these and then we'll just say a little bit. He says, we are samsaric beings and thus constantly attacked by an endless series of problems and sufferings which we are powerless to arrest. Sometimes we claim that we are free and can do anything, but on analysis we see this is untrue. For although we wish to be always happy and untroubled, troubles keep coming. Okay, so do you find this to be true, that you always want to be happy but troubles keep coming? You would say that's true. I find that to be true also. Endless series of problems and sufferings. And then sometimes wishing to be happy and recognizing the cause of happiness is virtue, we begin to practice virtue. Yeah, we do. As Buddhists, we think that way. But then obstacles arise from external conditions or from within us, which interfere with this practice, and it is unsuccessful. Now he says sometimes. Is that true? Sometimes you have the intention to practice virtue and it doesn't quite go that way. Your motivation slides, and I find that to be true. I see heads nodding. I take that as an affirmative. Furthermore, if a wrong view concerning the spiritual path arises in our mind, this can completely destroy our roots of virtue. Outside we may look the same, but inside we should be totally different and in a miserable situation. So this definitely rings true to me. If you have doubts coming up in your mind that go towards the wrong conclusion, you sit there and you're just miserable. And so he's trying to tell us here about, you can look fine, but actually inside when you pay attention, I don't know, would you guys agree that's true? When your mind goes that direction, it feels like your virtue is evaporating. I find that. Okay, I see your heads nodding. Okay, and then he goes on to explain how wrong views are more serious, more negative actually, heavier than actually the body, the non-virtues of body, including killing. It's heavier, these wrong views. So then he goes on and says, at a certain stage of spiritual development, which is one of the parts of the path of preparation, the stage of summits on the path of preparation, until then, we are subject to our roots of virtue being destroyed by wrong views. This is how important these wrong views are. So this illustrates the extent to which we lack real power over our existence, and it also shows that in our Dharma practice, we should proceed slowly and carefully, not taking what is beyond our capacity, otherwise there is danger of error. So for me, what that really points to is that the views we have, we're actually not safe from having wrong views until we're at this certain stage in the path of preparation. You already have bodhicitta on board then. And then I was thinking about this from something that we just read ahead in the book that we're studying, and the stream enterers get rid of 3 fetters. The stream enterers is the first level in that rendition of when you first have realized the nature of reality. And only then do they get rid of this one fetter of doubt, which to me kind of those tie together, that you still would be having, you still are subject to wrong views until you actually have direct realization of emptiness. That's kind of how I take this. So that's a interesting, precarious position, really. So that helps me to be more realistic about my practice. Now the other part of this so that all works for me. But the other parts that really don't work for me here is where I'd like to see what you think. In the first paragraph, this series of endless problems, he says we're powerless to arrest. And then another time in here he says this thing about until we have realized emptiness, essentially wrong views. This illustrates the extent to which we lack real power over our existence. And then he goes on in this last paragraph and says, we are so helpless in samsara then. Since we are so helpless in samsara then, we must investigate the cause for our being there. What is the source of our problems and how may we eliminate it? And yes, all of this kind of thinking leads you to this. Yes, there's a solution. But when I spend time with this, I think powerless to arrest. I don't think so. That doesn't work for me. I think this is a matter of perspective. There is this perspective where I can get these words to work. But I would prefer to use the words when we are constantly attacked by an endless series of problems and sufferings. I would say we are overpowered by our afflictions. I think that's really more the case. We're overpowered. Because if we were powerless, what would be the point of practicing? You know, I mean, from one perspective you could say, well, if your mind only has ignorance and you don't have any tools, you could maybe think you were powerless then, but I wouldn't use that word even then. I would say we're overpowered. Because I know people who aren't Dharma practitioners, aren't Buddhists, and yes, they are not going to probably get themselves out of samsara, but I can't even say that they are powerless to work with all the sufferings and series of problems that come up. You know, people have that, even are atheists, have senses of virtue sometimes and morals and all kinds of things.
When I hear this, how I think of it, what he's saying is that the powerless is that I may apply an antidote and I can get my mind clear and steady again, but that is going to come up again. So powerless in that way until I get to a certain point.
Powerless until you get to a certain point.
I'm going to have these afflictions arising no matter what I do.
Right.
Even though I don't want them.
Right. Yeah, I think if you take it that way, powerless to a certain point. But for me, when I'm, personally, when I read the words like helpless, powerless, right, I do. I realize that in reading this. I am taking this very literally, and I realize this is a perspective that's trying to lead you into the next point. Yeah.
Because it's powerless to arrest is what the phrase is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just like powerless. I'm powerless to stop the arising of problems.
Right.
So for me, that says, yeah, you created the cause for every one of these.
Mm-hmm.
And in that way, it's ripening. I'm powerless over the ripening result, and I created myself. So if I can look at it in that way, then it both eliminates my expectation that things should be different,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I'm really trying to practice with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's helpful. And then has the same kind of motivation than the predicting. Okay, let's acknowledge I created this, it's ripening, as soon as it's ripening, that ripened. I can deal with it differently. There I have power.
Right. Yeah, so what you're saying is, good point, powerless to arrest is recognizing that I created the karma, the result is here, and you can't arrest, you're powerless to arrest that result, and then the understanding that leads to, right, trying to shorten it. Yeah, I think you can make this all work. But I wouldn't want to fall to the side that I can go to when I take it literally. That won't work. So, because powerless, well, I don't know. What do you do with this then? Since we are so helpless in samsara, well, then he goes to it. Then we must investigate the cause for our being there.
Yeah. And we have to go for refuge.
Right. And we have to go for refuge. Yeah.
But you know, when we're under the influence of ignorance and afflictions, they run the show, and in that respect we are.
Yes, that's
When they're manifesting in
right.
our mind, I think I hear it as like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not meaning that you are powerless. You know, that we're powerless in general.
Right.
But when they're running the show,
Right.
but it's a different way of saying what you said. That when people are overpowered by afflictions.
Right. So anyway, this was my point. Yay. I think we're on accord.